the moment. We'll see how it goes.
Yes. Hey.
Hey, Chris Anderson. Where
Hey. Brook Barbier.
where where are you? You're I know you're on the road, but you don't look like you're in a familiar hotel since I do know all of the hotels in Europe, so I don't recognize this one.
Yeah. So I'm in Southampton, and it's a new hotel. So I had the opening dinner and also waiting through the internet at the new hotel. So I apologize and I thank you for your patience. But you're in
Maybe they
Chicago.
import maybe they imported some French internet to your hotel. So you can have that exciting high-speed Norman internet. No? Okay. And
Well,
you're frozen. What?
the unfortunate thing is this isn't French.
Right, you're in England, but maybe they brought it across the channel.
This isn't French. This isn't French internet. I know.
It's
So it should be
frustrating.
better,
Welcome
but
everybody to
it's not.
History Happy Hour. Thank you to Stephen Ambrose Historical Tours for your
Yeah.
assistance in bringing you the show. Check out the rich offering of military history tours. That's StephenAmbroseTours.com. And whether you're watching on live, watching on replay, or listening on the HHH podcast, welcome. And today
Podcast.
we're going to
Well
be
done.
talking about booze and the War of Independence. And hey, Chris, I should mention
Yes.
Patreon here.
Yeah.
We got a note from Ron Dries. Did I stick him at? Yeah. He pointed out that he had paid up via check. We had taken him off the Patreon. So
Oh.
oh, I know, bad, right? So I put him back on. So these are all our top shelf patrons. And if you want to be a top shelf patron, you can join us at patreon.com/history happy hour. So Ron's there and everybody else who's given money.
So you were suitably apologetic.
I was falling down upon myself to apologize. And Chris, I noticed that the movie Lucky Strike is in the theaters.
Is it?
It is.
Whatever do you mean? Yes, it is. Have you seen the movie, Rick?
I have seen the trailer. And I've looked at the credits.
It's a rollicking yarn, as they say.
Yes, and I saw your name in the credits. So, unless there's another Chris Anderson who's out there historically consulting. So,
it depends on what you think of the movie, because there may be.
Well, listen, Chris.
Just remember, for all you people, who go to see the movie, I just make suggestions. The director actually decides.
Yeah, I know. But Chris, we're having a little bit of a delay, right? So I think if you start talking, just keep going. I'll just stop. Don't worry about me. All right. So that's fine. Right. Can you tell me who's out there and what they're drinking as we celebrate, by the way, 4th of July?
I can. Well, what, United Empire Loyalist Day?
That's right. Who's there?
Did something else happen?
No, I can't think of it. We'll try to come up with it during the show.
Ron Dries, who's forgiven you, and he says thanks, Rick. Ross, Ellen Giles from Maryland, Elaine Kramer from Chicago, Katiki Miller from Tampa. So quite a few folks.
Well, fantastic. Why don't we do them a favor and get this show underway? Give us a cue. And he's frozen, but I'll play it.
So are you having more luck with Brook than I am?
What did you say, Chris?
Oh, I said, are you having better luck with Brook than I am? Is your American internet better than my British internet?
It is. So I'm sorry that you're suffering from internet. But anyway, listen, let's move forward and just do the best we can here. Today, we celebrate America's 250th birthday by talking about the founders drinking, which seems like the perfect show for us. And we have the perfect guest, Brook Barbier, a public historian who received her PhD in American history from Boston College, specifically researching Boston's social and cultural life during and after the Revolution. She has appeared on HHH before, and she spoke to attendees at the Lexington 250 tour a year ago, April. And two of Brook's favorite things are history and beer. So in 2013, she founded Ye Old Tavern Tours, which offer tours of Boston's historic sites. And she's the author of several books, including her most recent, which is called Cocked and Boozy, An Intoxicating History of the American Revolution. Brook Barbier, welcome to the train wreck known as History Happy Hour.
So glad to be back with you two.
Thank you.
Did you bring a cocktail today, Brook?
I am consuming water because I overconsumed cocktails on yesterday's 4th of July. So
fair enough. Fair enough. How about you, Mr. Anderson? Okay.
Well, this is not something that generally is celebrated in the Anderson household. However, and I am here in Britain with lousy internet, but I do have a nice white wine. So, and you, Rick?
Well, I have a drink that Brooke has cocktail recipes in her book, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. And I have a drink called a Stone Fence, which is hard cider and rum.
Yeah.
And I have not tried it yet. So here we go.
You got so excited about this. Like, are you going to make up a special revolutionary cocktail? And I'm like,
that's good.
Lord, I can't do that. So I'm glad you did.
That's good. Okay. Brooke, look, this show and your book, Match Made in Heaven.
Yes.
So I want to know, you say historians have ignored colonial alcohol consumption. Why have they done that? And what are they missing?
There seems to be a taboo around the amount that the founding generation drank, that if we talk about it, it'll somehow make their accomplishments seem lesser or maybe a little bit muddled. But the founding generation wasn't embarrassed by how much they drank. And so I don't think we should be either. Taverns were also so integral to the revolutionary spirit and important gathering places. And so talking about taverns and the alcohol just really helps us have a fuller picture of the American Revolution.
So, Brooke, and I apologize because Rick may have used this quote. So if he does, he'll stop me. But you have Mr. Adams saying, did you use this, Rick?
No, sir.
He says, I know not why we should not blush. I know not why we should blush. Oh, sorry. I know not why we should not blush to confess that molasses was an essential ingredient in American independence. You also, later on in the book, Adams can be a bit of a prude about his alcohol. So maybe discuss kind of what he's driving at here.
Sure. That's one of my favorite quotations, and it's a driver of the book. John Adams saying, we shouldn't blush to confess that molasses is an essential ingredient in American independence, has a couple of different meanings. But first, we have to acknowledge that molasses was the key ingredient in rum in the 18th century. And for the founding generation, rum was the primary spirit consumed. So that's the connection between molasses and alcohol. When Parliament passes their first tax in what we know then as the timeline of no taxation without representation, it's on foreign sugar and molasses. And the first city to protest this is Boston, which is the leading rum distiller in the 13 colonies. So this Sugar Act is going to directly affect their economic interests, and their economic interests are directly tied to rum, not just the production of it, but the consumption of it. So that's one way we can take Adams' very liberal meaning. But there's two other meanings that I see. The next tax passed after the Sugar Act is just a year later, the Stamp Act. And every colony protests the Stamp Act in their own ways. Boston begins with violent mobs targeting the tax act collector, and then Newport, Rhode Island quickly follows Boston's lead. And these riots were violent and intimidating, and a lot of those rioting were fueled by rum. And so that's the second way that we see alcohol influencing the American Revolution, is with these protests. And then the third way molasses is a key ingredient in American independence is that it wasn't natural for the 13 colonies to see themselves as uniting. Each colony was separate. They had their own religions, cultures, demographics. And so someone in Pennsylvania would care little for what was going on in South Carolina, not because they didn't care about people, but because they considered their home colony their home country. So how do you get 13 disparate colonies to work together? Alcohol can really help. And we see that in the First and Second Continental Congress. And Chris, as you said, we really see a transformation from John Adams at this time too.
I want to ask a question about the First Continental Congress. And I want to go back a couple of weeks ago. Chris and I had on as a guest on our show, Michael Osland, who has written a new book, National Treasure, about the history of the Declaration of Independence. And then last week, that subject came up again as we were teasing this interview. So let me play you a bit from last week's show. What was the fuel that fired the spark that lit the imaginations? Yeah.
So we had that episode about Philadelphia and the Declaration of Independence a couple weeks ago. And I think that was actually the first episode of Drunk History. And a bunch of guys got together and said, no, wait a minute, let's do this.
Oh, right. And let's charge King George with okay. And first of all, I want to say that I think that really illustrates the intellectual level of our show. And secondly, but my question for you is, okay, what's the real story there? Is there some truth to that, or is that completely off the mark?
It's right on the mark, in that what we know for certain is that the delegates to the First Continental Congress, which was all 12 colonies except for Georgia, arrived suspicious of each other. And we have that from delegates' diaries and letters. And they were particularly suspicious of Massachusetts, which had a rightful reputation for being radical. I mean, this is after the Boston Tea Party. But the other thing that we see happening in these diaries and records is party after party, tavern after tavern, gathering in the afternoons and evenings and drinking extensively. And then what do we see at the end of the First Continental Congress? These 12 colonies working together and making far more radical decisions than almost anyone thought possible about the direction that they should be taking against the crown. So we don't have anyone saying, oh, I got so drunk and that's why I supported Massachusetts. But we do have these listings of parties, and then we have these radical decisions being made. There's one instance after the First Continental Congress and the news of all of their decisions are reached. There's a man in New York who said they must have drank 30 bumpers apiece before they approved all of these measures. And he's saying a bumper, by the way, is a glass filled to the rim, and it suggests what to do with it, bump another bumper. And so he's saying, whether sort of joking or not, he's saying they must have drank too much to come to these outrageous decisions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on a long delay.
Okay.
I think Chris is frozen there. So I'm going to go back, Brooke, and talk. We're having just some internet problems, guys, from the hotel that Chris is at. So we apologize for that. I think one of the things that you talk a lot about drinking culture in the colonial times, and maybe we can kind of just go back and, for a little bit of context, talk about that. Where did people drink? What did they drink? And how much did they drink? Now, my understanding has always been that they're heavy drinkers, but I don't know if there's some ways that you can quantify that. So that's where, what, and how much.
let me begin by dispelling an idea that most people have, that they drank so much because the water was unsafe. That isn't true. They had good water there, but drinking and making beer from the water was more enjoyable. The other who was drinking is everybody. If you were an enslaved person, you would be drinking. If you were a woman, a man, children drank something called small beer. That's 1% alcohol, which is not going to do much to you. Some kombuchas today have about 1% alcohol. You would be drinking, as an adult, you'd be drinking a wide variety of beverages. So that could include beer, cider, wine, brandy, whiskey, and then we mentioned rum, which was the primary spirit. And then a lot of these drinks could also be made into a cocktail. And some of these cocktails are pretty complex. You're drinking the Stone Fence, which is cider and rum, two beverages that New England made quite easily. But there are also some really complex cocktails that are multi-step, multi-ingredient, and so you could be drinking any number of those items. And then, how much did they drink? Well, it's really hard to quantify. And it's sort of unsatisfying to say this, but it's far more than we do today. There's some estimates, it would almost amount to about double what we drink today, but that's imprecise. So we don't have a good number that I'm comfortable saying, but they were drinking far more than we do today.
It's fat to read about, and I've just been really struck by is the tradition of toasting. And so we all know about, going to a dinner and having a toast, and we drink toast to somebody at a wedding. Well, they would do these events, and they would have many toasts. And the one that I'm thinking of, and you wrote about it, and I have actually researched this before, but there was this great Sons of Liberty event in 1775 in Boston, where they had 45 toasts, and they printed them all in the newspaper the next day. I just have the first three here. Chris is going to be very happy that they toast the king.
Well, obviously. Thank you.
Yes.
They toast the Queen, America and her brave sons of liberty, and then some people who may not be so well known to our audience. Wilkes, who was a member of Parliament and later Lord Mayor of Britain, a great friend of the Patriots, the Glorious 92, and it goes on and on. So my first question is, who are these people that are getting toasted? Who are the loyal 92? And listen, they couldn't possibly have drunk a shot for each one. The Patriots would have died. There wouldn't have been a revolution. What's going on there?
That would have been. That's what
Oh, he's back, and he's making up for lost time.
Yes, good for you, Chris. Rick, I think these toasts are from 1769, the party in Dorchester.
Right, correct.
Is that right? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So the Glorious 92 is 92 Massachusetts legislators, some of whom were at that big party, who in 1768 had rejected the royal governor's request to rescind what was they called the circular letter. It wouldn't make any sense to rescind it because the ideas had already literally been circulated, but it was more of a gesture to say, like, we don't acknowledge that anymore. And 92-17 voted to not rescind the circular letter. What's great about this is then Paul Revere is asked to make a punch bowl, a silver punch bowl to commemorate the 92. And we have an account of it being enjoyed at a tavern. John Hancock was there at the unveiling. And by the way, that punch bowl incredibly still exists and is on display at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So really special.
Right. That's the one with Wilkes and Liberty on it.
Yeah, they said it might be the most valuable thing in the museum is that punch bowl.
It's so heavily engraved. And what's important to know too is if you saw a punch bowl in the 18th century, you would just put it straight to your lips and pass it around the table. Today, you would expect to see a ladle and cups and you would use those, but not in the 18th century. But what you're asking too is, Rick, is something really important here, is that this party's in 1769, and they are praising the king and the queen, and then the good feelings between the colonies and the mother country, because we tend to think of the American Revolution as this inevitable march, that as soon as the Sugar Act is passed in 64 and the Stamp Act in 65, that everyone's going to want to declare independence. But it's absolutely not true. When a threat was addressed, like the Stamp Act was repealed in 1766, people sort of calmed down and returned to being loyal Britons. But the toasts, importantly, were prepared in advance, and they transmitted what stance the host wanted partygoers to adopt. We can talk about this, but there was a lot of etiquette around toasting. And so these toasts intended to mean something and transmit goals and ideals.
And did they, Chris, sorry.
No. Yeah.
Did they, how much did they drink for each toast? I know you weren't there, but.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't imagine them taking just a shot of rum. I think you could just take a sip of your beer and huzzah, and then keep going. But even if you took 45 sips of beer, you would eventually feel the effects. And John Adams, after this party, said, well, no one got drunk, which sort of defies logic, but that's often the case, is that there are instances where they say, no, we didn't get drunk. It's the British.
Maybe he was
officers.
too cockeyed to see that anybody got drunk. Yeah.
Right. And there's some idea, I sort of get into it in the book, about who actually gets drunk and who doesn't. And there's some power there. There's some social structures going on there. And so I think this is also John Adams playing into that the Sons of Liberty don't get drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could pick up on that, because far be it from me to say that Adams and his ilk were a bit hypocritical. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how British people get drunk, loyalists get drunk, redcoats get drunk, Indians get drunk, people of darker hues get drunk, but we don't get drunk. Talk about some of, they love alcohol, they use alcohol, but then they say, oh, no.
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. And it's something I really look at in the book, is that the laws around alcohol and who can consume and when they can consume and where they consume show us, in some sense, who they're trying to control, who they, being the leaders, are trying to control. But also you see it's quite simply in how you talk about other people getting drunk. So the Stamp Act riots, witnesses said they got drunk, that they rolled out strong drink or rum. And there's no problem in identifying those mobbing as drinking. But one of the people that I talk about in the book that serves as a pretty stark example of this is John Adams, but also his wife, Abigail Adams. Abigail had a brother who died quite young due to alcohol-related addiction, alcohol-related health problems. And then her and John Adams' son, dies very young also. And Abigail Adams never names the problem for either of them. She never says that they're drunk or that they were addicted to this. But she doesn't have a problem in calling her servants drunkards, because that's a different class. And so she would write letters about that they were drunk and had to be carried away, and she can't find a sober servant in Philadelphia. But she wouldn't say that about people in her own family. Now, in some sense, this is a very natural protection of people in your family, that you don't want to name what you can so easily identify in others. But we do see this play out even in the 18th century.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's amazing in your book really brought home to me, if you read revolutionary history, how many things happen in taverns.
Yes.
The guys who carry out the Boston Tea Party are gathering at the Green Dragon Tavern. The the militia, are gathering at Buckman Tavern in Lexington. You have Washington's goodbye to his officers at Francis Tavern in New York. You have many other meetings and sorts of things that happen at taverns. So they are a really important part of colonial society, aren't they? And I would add to that, just from my own knowledge, Lexington, which was, I think, 800 people at the time and just a few hundred adults, had at least 3 taverns. And so there's a lot of them, and they're important. Why is that?
Taverns were community centers where people gathered with people who lived in their town. But importantly, there were no hotels in North America until the 1790s. The concept didn't exist. And so if you were traveling and needed a place to stay, you'd be staying in a tavern. So not only would you be gathering from people from your own town, but you'd be likely to encounter visitors from far-flung colonies where you could hear gossip. There weren't many public spaces in colonial America aside from taverns. You might go to a church that in some sense was a public space. The courthouse was in some sense a public space, or the common, but otherwise taverns were the place to do that. And it wasn't just a place to drink and gather with your friends. You could listen to music or gamble or dance, but also bills of sale and auction notices were displayed, as were new laws. So it's a political space, it's a social space, it's an important economic space. Taverns did so much work in the 18th century.
But something, obviously, Rick and I go back and forth about who's right and who's wrong.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah, moving on. But we talk about, it's easy to sort of romanticize all this and say, oh yeah, they were just having a good time at the tavern, but there's a violent element about this, right? So, you talk about this, and I talk about it when I've been in Boston on tour. 1764, a drunken mob disassembles Thomas Hutchinson's house, sacks it, threatens his family. And the after action of that, they say that the mob was well supplied with strong drink. So maybe you can touch on sort of the violent aspects and alcohol's part to play in that. And more specifically, in this instance, who's supplying it? They're obviously using alcohol to achieve an end.
That's right. And I think there is some risk in hearing that the founder generation drank a lot and thinking, oh, it's all just jolly good times. And that's something that I address directly in the book, that their alcohol has a dual nature, that a couple of drinks can make you feel looser, and that's what can build camaraderie and social connection and social trust. And we need that. But too much, and research has shown that people can increase violence, increase belligerence as a result of too much to drink. And we see that too. The Stamp Act riots in 1765 are the very perfect example of this. So we see the account, their first target's Andrew Oliver, and they raid his cellar of his alcohol. Then they do the same to Thomas Hutchinson. Witness says they were in an intoxicated rage by the time they got to Hutchinson's house. And then shortly after, we see a riot in Newport, Rhode Island. There's a parade one night and then the riots the next night. But the parade, they weren't getting enough people out. And interestingly, Chris, they say the quiet part out loud. They report that not enough people came. And so it said strong drink in plenty with Cheshire cheese was provided to provoke intemperance and riot. Right. And there it is. It's saying that there's some who seem to think that if you provided alcohol and cheese, by the way, that it would provoke rioting.
Cheese, yeah.
But who are these people that are supplying this, and do they see this as basically a tool?
I couldn't find any evidence of someone saying directly, here's who's supplying the strong drink.
Yeah.
But I can give you an example where we know who's supplying alcohol, but we don't see it turn into a riot, but it's still, it sort of addresses this question, is that on militia training days, the end of the training day usually capped off with plentiful alcohol. And that was supplied by the militia officer, their leader. And that's one of the reasons that that leader would be elected to head the militia, was they could provide alcohol. So we see one instance when the Massachusetts countryside is preparing for a potential attack, that the militia is after training gathering at a tavern and drinking, and some British spies notice and say that they're full of pot velour, which is essentially liquid courage. But they didn't engage in a battle that day.
Right.
But that's to kind of address your question, where we don't always know who's providing the alcohol, and certainly not for the Stamp Act riots. But there are instances where community leaders or a militia leader would be hosting a party or provide the alcohol after training day.
Yeah.
So one of the founders who you write about, Benjamin Rush, Dr. Benjamin Rush, who signed the Declaration of Independence, was concerned about overindulging. And he came up with this great chart, and I want to present it here, which he called his moral and physical thermometer. And if you're drinking water or milk or beer, you're moral and physical, and you have health and serenity of mind. But as you go down the list, things get harsher until you get to the bottom. And this is my favorite. If you're drinking rum with pepper in it, that leads to hatred of just government, murder, suicide, death, right? And so now listen, I love pepper. And my mother used to say that I put pepper in everything. And I'm going to put some in my drink here. Is this going to kill me? Is this going to lead to my instant death? But maybe not. But talk to us about Rush and the others in this time period who are at the beginning of what will be a big temperance movement over the next 100 years. And I will now try my stone fence with pepper. And if I don't survive,
Just remember, you said I get the books, right?
You can have the books.
Okay,
yes.
Go ahead. Drink up.
Okay.
The thermometer is a wonderful visual. I mean, it's really smart, that a tool of Benjamin Rush's, but it is pretty extreme. But one thing that's really important to talk about just from jump with the temperance movement is Benjamin Rush believed that beer, wine, and cider, alcohol that was fermented, was healthful and good for you. It's when you go down to the distilled spirits that he had a problem. So the temperance movement that changes in the 19th and 20th century and eventually leads to prohibition is abstinence of alcohol. But he is talking about throughout his writings that other drinks are healthful. And so he says that wine can lead to strength. But then when you're getting to the morning drams, which would be a drink of rum usually, or whiskey, the pepper and rum in particular, Rick, there's an account that he says, he's writing in one of his writings, he says that there was this man who used to drink diluted rum. Then he started drinking rum straight because it wouldn't satisfy him anymore. And then he resorted to drinking pepper and rum. And to be honest, I never fully understood what he was saying. My guess, my best guess, but I don't know, is that he's saying like that even the rum needed more firepower by adding pepper directly into it. And then you may be not surprised to learn that, and I'm not laughing at this, but more just you putting the pepper in your stone fence there. He said he died not soon thereafter. But what he's trying to show is the slippery slope that can come when you drink distilled spirits. And Benjamin Rush is really quite interesting. I have a whole chapter on the temperance movement because it is really important. Even though it was in its infancy at this time, we see it not just with Rush, but with Native peoples as well. But for him, when the Constitution rolls around, he identifies distilled spirits as anti-federalist and fermented drinks as federalist. So drinking directly becomes political for him too.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I just think I want to pick up on that because I think that the temperance angle is interesting. And that was some of the things in the book that kind of made me go, well, that's kind of a new take. because obviously, you have Hogarth, and he does his series of prints about gin lane, so that's an issue. Are people approaching that sort of question in the colonies the same way? Like, well, wait a minute, maybe this is a problem, or is Benjamin Rush kind of an outlier? I mean, is there sentiment like, hey, wait a minute, we got to check this?
By the way, that the gin craze of the 1740s, you see a similar classist angle there too. Yeah. That all of a sudden gin could be afforded by the lower classes, and this then became a problem, and people were drinking too much. So I find that part of it interesting too. But with Rush specifically, he isn't a lone voice in the wilderness, but the temperance movement doesn't take off. Right. With his first writing. There's another Quaker, also from Philadelphia, who publishes a pamphlet in 1774 talking about the importance of avoiding distilled liquors. And then we also see native peoples, native prophets, arguing against drinking rum. And in some cases, the native peoples were saying, don't drink anything at all. But for all those people, whether in Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or native peoples, those were smaller voices. They didn't represent the majority, and they didn't represent we can look back as historians and say, this is the beginning of the temperance movement, but we wouldn't, it wasn't reaching broad appeal.
Sure. But there is
during the founding generation. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I cannot help myself. So, I'm choking.
Are you supposed to be dead?
I'm choking on the pepper. I think that's what happened, is that this gentleman who Benjamin Rush knew started coughing with the pepper, and then he gave it up. So, but there's somebody else in the. I know it's not a temperance movement in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but somebody else you write about is a native named Handsome Lake.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him, because I had never heard of him, and I found that a fascinating story.
Handsome Lake was from what we would say is upstate New York, and he became addicted to alcohol. By all accounts, that he was addicted to alcohol, and later in his life, he thought he was going to die soon, and then he was visited. He said by 3 prophets who told him that if he gave up drinking, they would let him live. And he agreed to give up drinking. And then he eventually wrote what became known as the Code of Handsome Lake, which was a series of tenets to follow specifically for native peoples. The single most important, the very first tenet and most important of the Code of Handsome Lake is to swear off alcohol. And so there's some parts of the principles of Handsome Lake that are still followed by some native communities today. And his movement grew in popularity. But again, we're talking smaller voices that take some time to pick up. So my book ends in 1800, and eventually Handsome Lake and Thomas Jefferson, when Jefferson is president, write to each other, and Jefferson praises Handsome Lake's effect on his people. But sort of like Benjamin Rush, they're a key player, but they're early.
Yeah. So Brooke, you spend a lot of time talking about sort of alcohol's contribution to the first protests, the opposition to taxation, all that stuff. And Rick and I being from Boston, we probably focus on that quite a bit. But the other aspect of the book that's interesting that you touch on is, talk to us a little bit about how alcohol is used to sustain the fight, because it's all great leading up to starting the revolution, but then it starts. And you carry that story through, but talk a little bit about the part that's playing in keeping the fight going.
Alcohol rations are part of the Continental Army since 1775. There's an understanding that alcohol can do a bunch of different things for a soldier. First, it can break up the monotony of a day. Not most days aren't spent engaged in battle. And so alcohol was a part of 18th century life, so it should be a part of a soldier's life. There's some idea too that alcohol can induce a soldier to fight longer or harder. It can dull pain. It can help soften the effects of a winter, of a particularly harsh winter. So it can do a lot of things that it could do for anybody, civilian or soldier. But during war in the 18th century, it's particularly important. And here again, we see this sort of contrast that alcohol is expected to be provided to soldiers, but we don't want soldiers drunk. So there's an idea that we're going to give them alcohol because that's what we do in the 18th century, and for all those reasons I said. But they really look down upon drunkenness among soldiers for pretty obvious reasons. I'll give you an example. George Washington was furious at one point in the war because not enough alcohol or food was being provided to the army. They didn't have enough rations. And he said, we have the country and the goods to make more alcohol, and we should be doing that for the soldiers. But then, so we see Washington understanding the importance of alcohol. But then in 1780, the Ladies Association of Philadelphia is founded by Esther DeBert Reed. And she and other the Ladies Association solicit donations from Philadelphia, and then a couple other states also join in. And she says, we want to present this money to the soldiers. We want to give them a sum of money that they can spend on their own. And it's pretty beautiful. She says, we want them to know that it's out of our appreciation for what they're doing. And this is a point in the war when public morale is low, soldier morale is low. And Washington, ultimately, they go back and forth. And I write about this in the book, but ultimately Washington says, we can't give them a lump sum of money because frankly, I'm worried they'll blow it on alcohol. And so that's where we again see this tension, which plays out in all parts of colonial and early Republican life. That idea that alcohol is necessary for the economy, for society, for culture, but there are downsides to it too.
Well, I would also, add here, because I'm such a big fan of George Washington. He was a massive producer of rot gut whiskey. So
later.
Oh, okay. So he gets to it eventually.
Yeah, after he's a general.
Before that, he's a
Puritan.
President. Before that, he's a Puritan. All right. Okay. Rick.
No, absolutely not, Chris. He does get to distilling later in his life, but I mean, some of his earliest accounts talk about the alcohol that he took when he was surveying land. He has a handwritten recipe when he was a young man for molasses beer. So George Washington imbibed too.
Well, listen, so this is a perfect time to ask the question I've been dying to ask. So I want you to think carefully about this before you answer, okay? Who among the founding fathers was the greatest lover of alcohol? So some possibilities, and it doesn't have to be one of these. It could be Washington. And I know in his expenses for the revolution, there's a lot of alcohol listed in there that he bought during the revolution. He wanted Congress to reimburse him for. Was it Jefferson, who I know bought thousands of bottles of wine as president? You write about that. Benjamin Franklin, who said that wine is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. John Hancock, the famous smuggler of rum. Samuel Adams, not a brewer, but a patriot. So who is the greatest fan, lover, whatever, of alcohol, and what's your evidence?
I'm going to answer this in two parts. Okay. The first part is, who would I most want to party with? John Hancock.
Wow. Okay.
He'd be the most fun because the alcohol would be flowing. He was a really good host. But who loved alcohol the most? And I've had time to consider this, Rick, even outside of your question. And I think the answer is none other than Thomas Jefferson. And this is partly because he was so curious about alcohol that it wasn't just something he drank. It was something that he wanted to learn about. He tried the enslaved peoples at Monticello. He wanted them making beer or cider, experimenting with making wine. So alcohol seems to be the most woven into his life. And so I think that's the reason that he would be, that he could take that moniker of the biggest lover of alcohol.
Rick, it wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that he might have better wine at Monticello than they had in Boston Harbor.
Well,
right?
okay, so yeah, I could be.
Well, let me say this too. This is why I said Hancock's who I want to party with, because Hancock would be fun. Jefferson, we get the sense that he, at least from John Quincy Adams, who's no lover of Jefferson, but he said at one of the dinners there was a usual dissertation of wine. So basically he got bored by Jefferson pulling out a bottle of wine and just explaining on and on about it.
Oh, was Jefferson kind of like the boyfriend, the friend in Midnight in Paris, who's the obnoxious one, the pedantic one, who's he's an expert on everything. So was Jefferson sort of like, and this is a French wine with a lovely nose and blah blah blah, kind of going along like that?
I don't remember the movie, but yes,
it's okay. It's okay. Listen, I'm amazed that I'm
pedantic by coming up with.
I'm amazed that I pulled the title out of my head. Yeah, the pedantic one. Yeah,
but I think, but Jefferson bored. We have evidence that Jefferson bored at least one person with his wine who recorded that. So certainly, it's pretty easy to imagine that he traveled extensively throughout Europe and made many relationships with the winemakers there and the merchants there. And when you have a passion for something, it's easy to get carried away and start talking and forget that other people don't care as much as you. I mean, this happens. So, but Jefferson was just so curious in his library.
I didn't say that. It was I did. It was right here.
I did it because
I was setting my own self up there too. By the way,
we've all been guilty.
Yes, but he had, his library had all of these books about distilling and brewing and alcohol, whereas Hancock's library didn't have that so much, or Washington's didn't have that, and so this is where I give him the credit that it's not just drinking alcohol, but he's curious about its production and about it and the details.
So, Brooke, I mean, one of the things I really appreciate about the book, though, is you do look at it in a serious light as well. It's not just all like fun at the tavern. So maybe just kind of share with us your thoughts about moments where you think that alcohol or alcohol use impeded the revolutionary movement, where there are times where maybe, this is not the time or place.
That's a really good question that I actually haven't, this is going to maybe sound sort of ridiculous, but I try not to make like a judgment about, it shouldn't have happened this way. I know your question and I really get your question, but I don't think I know that I didn't approach it that way. Right. I was more trying to observe that this is what happened. And so let's deal with the results of that. But certainly when you read about the distress of Abigail Adams and her family, because of alcohol addiction, you wish that things turned out differently for her family. And knowing more about alcohol addiction or something like that, might be my answer there.
Well, go ahead.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, it is certainly, you do touch on this in the book. There are people saying, okay, there are some downsides to all this. So,
well, certainly, like the burning of Thomas Hutchinson's, or the destruction of Thomas Hutchinson's house. I think.
You mean the violent sack and looting and destruction?
I think not only was it obviously deeply upsetting to Hutchinson, but that level of violence probably was not really what Samuel Adams and other Patriot leaders were looking for, because you're trying to build support, not get people so shocked that you drive people away from your cause. And so it's sort of interesting, like after the Boston massacre, they realized that we've got to tone things down because it's a powder keg right now and we're not really ready to fight a war or do anything. So we got to like tamp it all down. And maybe that's, part of that story.
by the way, the destruction of Hutchinson's house by any measure is terrifying, and would be for people, even townspeople who were sympathetic to protesting the Stamp Act. And even Samuel Adams and John Hancock have a problem. They don't have a problem targeting Andrew Oliver because he was the Stamp Act collector. They can set his carriage on fire and drink his alcohol, and they're okay with that. But the destruction of Thomas Hutchinson's home was something different that Patriot leaders did say, you can't do it this way. But it didn't mean people didn't do it that way.
All right. Yeah.
So, Brooke, and I know we're alternating between serious questions and fun questions here, between the serious one and the fun one. Yeah. Okay, you have cocktail recipes in the book at the end of every chapter, and I had one, a stone fence, which has definitely loosened me up a little bit over the course of the show. And so my question for you, you have, in each case, you have like an original recipe from the time, like you talked with the stone fence about how Joseph Plum Martin liked them and how he made them. And then you have a modern recipe. So I'm wondering, I'm sure you had a wealth of sources. So what were some of your more fun sources of cocktail recipes?
The cocktail recipes were at times pretty challenging to find. I had to make a really good note when I found one so that I didn't forget where I found it. One of the first and easiest places to look is in cookbooks. One of the recipes I include in John Adams' Recorded Trying is syllabub. And that is just, that term means nothing to us today, but in the 18th century, a lot of cookbooks had syllabub.
Oh, syllabubs are great. And I've made syllabubs. Yeah. They are like a combination of a dessert and drink.
You're one of the few who would know what it means. What's that?
And it's like a combination of a dessert and drink, right? So you have you have wine, you have cream, you have lemon, sugar, all these things. And you whip it up.
Yes, exactly. But Rick, you're one of the few today who would know what syllabub is. And that's not a bad thing. It's just
it's
a Rick lost to us.
It's a Rick thing.
Whereas Benjamin Franklin has a recipe for brandy milk punch. And some places, I'm based in Boston, and some of the fancier places around here have clarified cocktails on their menu, which is what a milk punch is. So some of them have passed us by, and then others are very relevant today. But two of my recipes are in the hands of are written by Benjamin Franklin and one by Thomas Jefferson. So these are coming from the
horse's mouth. Yeah.
So Brooke, I mean, obviously you're spending your time focused on the revolutionaries and that story, but is American alcohol consumption unique for the time? Do people comment, folks in the colonies, boy, those guys can really party? Is it different there than it is elsewhere? Or is there something unique about how the colonies view alcohol?
I didn't see that there was something unique. When visitors would travel to taverns, one of the things that kind of surprised them, or at least in a couple instances, was how many toasts that you had to do before you would drink, or when someone came into the tavern, you had to toast them. Some people found that to become quite tedious. But I think most of this comes from where you are in England, that for the English settlers in the 17th century, they're bringing that strong culture of drink and brewing. Right. And that they do almost immediately upon colonizing North America. So I think if anything, it's coming from that British culture. And for that reason, the British, we don't hear them when the soldiers, for example, or officers come, we don't really think of them remarking too much on people over drinking.
Yeah. Well, you'll be happy to know that they left a lot of that culture here, and it's still quite strong, but okay.
Well,
they didn't just take it. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's taken firm root.
You described some pretty big bashes
exactly.
in this book, like the 1778 British bash in Philadelphia for Admiral Howe and his brother General Howe as they're leaving their commands to return to England. and it's this huge multi-day party. And reading your book and reading this account, I was reminded of a book that Jack Anderson wrote about his time as a leg man or assistant for Drew Pearson, who was a big columnist in the 1940s and 50s. And he describes a blowout party in Washington that he went to in the early 1950s, I think. Maybe it was in the late 40s. It went late into the night. People were out of control. He describes, congressmen of mature years making advances on young ladies. Anderson was a non-drinking Mormon, so he's pretty shocked by all this. But I thought later he discovered it was just the norm. And so has anything really changed since the Revolutionary War times, or are people today just a little bit more keeping it a little bit more under wraps? You don't want to answer
you're referring
this.
to that big party for house. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Was so offensive to people because it was so public, this party, but also so private. And I think that's where some of the trouble happens, is when people who are trying to regulate others drinking or contributions to the war effort then don't display the same sort of moderation. So I think people who, it's a tale as old as time for people who say one thing is good for other people, but then don't follow it themselves.
On that note, did you go? Go ahead, Chris. You can finish.
Well, no, I guess this was just, we had a quick question, and I think this is a really great one. Sharon Peterson wants to know that, having been inspired and been enticed by your recipes in our conversation, she wanted to know if there were favorite hangouts, bars, pubs in Boston or elsewhere where our viewers / listeners could get close. Are there places they could go where they could experience a little bit of that flavor?
Sharon, it's almost as if you're a plant, because at the end of the book, one of the appendices has a historic drinking guide with places in Boston, Virginia, New York, Rhode Island that you can drink today. Sometimes it's just a tavern that you can only visit, but I specify which ones you can drink in. In Boston in 2013, I started a tour company called Ye Olde Tavern Tours. We take people to see historic sites on Boston's Freedom Trail and stop in historic taverns. So we'd love to see you, Sharon, the next time you're in Boston. But the historic drinking guide provides some of my favorite places where you can drink and feel the historic vibes.
I think a history happy hour field trip could be.
Oh, this sounds like something.
Yes.
Let's discuss it with the bosses and see what we can get going. Brook Barbier, we want to thank you so much. And I just want to say, so your book is called Cocked and Boozy, and I have 2 copies of it because my friend Helen Lukash, who was watching today, sent me a hardcover copy, said, you should see this book. And I said, Helen, it's so awesome. We're interviewing the author this week.
So you didn't think to send me a copy,
Helen.
did you?
Yeah, Helen, why didn't you send? Because Helen doesn't want to spend $300 to send a book to England and to go on a huge pile of books in your living room.
The Cube.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, Brooke, check out. Yeah.
That was nice of you, Helen. Helen, thank you for your support.
Yes, Brooke thanks you for your support. Brook Barbier is the author of the book Cocked and Boozy, an intoxicating history of the American Revolution. She's a terrific historian, a great fun person, and we love talking to her and having her on. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us today on History Happy Hour.
My pleasure, you guys. Good to see you.
You too. Good luck.
Huzzah.
Huzzah.
God save the king.
Yes, and Brooke, hang on, if you will, and we'll say goodbye to you off the air. But Chris, you came back. Did you restart your computer? Because you came back and everything was fine.
Yeah, well, I stopped relying on the internet, and I'm linking to my phone. So look at me being all high tech. It's a hot spot, baby. I figured that out all by myself.
Wow.
I know.
Who are you, and what have you done with Chris
And body
Anderson?
snatched.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I did it all by myself. Yeah.
Oh, well, we say huzzah to that. Next week, Chris, we are have I don't know, perhaps a more serious take, but a different take on the war for independence.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to Richard Vague, who's the author of The Banker Who Made America, about Thomas Willing and the rise of the American financial aristocracy. I have not looked at this book yet. Sounds very interesting, and I'm willing to check it out. And see, have you read it yet? Have you looked at it?
No, I haven't. They haven't sent it to me yet.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll be getting you a copy. If Cheryl's not listening, we'll get on to Cheryl and make sure you've got a version of it. But
can I just ask all of our viewers, could somebody please find out great loyalists of the American War of Independence book or something, because this is Rick is doing patriot.
Hey, I am. Okay. So I don't. I defer to you on all book choices. And Cheryl is the one who's picked most of these because turns out yesterday was a big anniversary. It was, in fact, the 250th birthday of America. So whatever. Like it or not. All right, Chris. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today and listening to us. Kvetch. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Shout at us on Blue Sky. Listen to our podcast. Back us on Patreon and browse historyhappyhour.com.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.